Hey, this is Brilith with Nox Game Studios, and today we're going to continue our series on implementing multiplayer in Unity using Photon and Playfab. In this video, we're going to set up Playfab in our project so we can create players and data that persists online. If you find this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you can stay up to date on this series. Now let's head over to playfab.com, and once you're there, you can either click on sign up or you can click the little icon here to log in. Since I've set up an account already, I'm going to click the icon. I'm just going to hit this checkbox to remember me because this is the computer I always do development on, and I'm going to log in. Once you log in or create an account, this is basically what the dashboard will look like. It has each one of your studios listed, and you can have multiple studios under an account. And inside of a studio, you have these tiles, and these tiles are what they call titles. You can see if we go new title here. So what you want to do is either create a new studio with your desired name, or the default studio, if they create one for you, you can actually hit the little ellipse here and go to studio settings, and you can go to the studio name and change that if you would like. But for me, I'm just going to leave it how it is. But I'm going to go back to the ellipse and I'm going to hit new title. So under create title, the one field that we have to fill out is the name. So I'm going to call this Curse of the Beast. For the website URL, that's optional, as well as the image. And I'm going to choose for genre, I'm going to say action. For player modes, multiplayer. And for monetization, it's going to be free to play. And for the target platforms, I'm going to say Windows, with possibly we may do Android in the future, as well as iOS. But for now, I'm just going to leave it those two. You can come back and change this at any time. And let's hit create title. So once we create the title, it'll by default take us to the title dashboard. This is where you can see all your different players that you have set up and a lot of other features as well. So if we want to go back to the original page where we saw the studio and title, you click this icon up here. And now under your studio name, which mine's just Brill, you will see the new title that you created. And this title ID is something that we need to use when setting up Playfab in our project. So what we need to do now is actually download the Playfab extension package that we can install into our Unity project. So let's go to the help and let's go to docs and API. Once we're under the documentation, what we want to do is go to SDKs. Under game engines, we want to go to Unity 3D, and we want to click download editor extensions. This will download a small file to your computer that is a custom Unity package that we can import into our project. Now let's switch back into Unity. Once we're here, we want to go to Assets, Import Package, Custom Package, and then just navigate to where that file downloaded to, and select it and hit Open. So once it opens, it'll have this Import Unity package, and we want to import everything here. Now that the Playfab package is finished installing, you should see this pop up here that says Playfab. And if you hadn't set up an account, you can now do so at this time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to login, and for the email, I'm going to type in my email, brilith@yahoo. And then I'm going to paste in my password. And once you do that, you can hit login. And you can see it'll say no SDK is installed. And all you have to do now is to install Playfab SDK. Click that. Once the package finally installs the SDK, you will see this little note here that it's installed. What we want to do now is go to the Settings tab. And for the studio, we want to click on this little drop down and click your studio name. And then by default, it'll populate a title ID. However, if this is not the correct title ID, you can hit the drop down and select another one. Once you've done that, we are now ready to get started with building out a login scene and set up the code to connect to Playfab. So I'm just going to go up here and I'm going to close the tab. If you need to get Playfab back, you can use this drop down or go to Windows, Playfab Editor Extensions. So now let's go to File, New Scene, and there you go, File, Save. We're going to save this under our Projects, scenes. We're going to call this login. Now let's right click, go to UI, and let's add a canvas to this. Inside the canvas, let's add a UI image, and let's stretch that to be the whole thing. And let's pick a sprite. Under my art, I have a register/login image that I'm going to use. Just going to rename this image to background. Now let's right click on canvas again and go UI image, and we're going to call this form. For the image here, we're going to navigate to whatever image you want, but for me, I'm going to use this gray panel. For the width, I'm going to use 500, I think, and for the height, I'm going to use 400. Now let's drag this down a little bit. There we go. Under the form, let's add additional game objects. Let's add a Text Mesh Pro. And if you haven't installed this already into your project, you may be prompted for an import. We also want to add another UI element that is a text mesh input field. And lastly, a button. So we'll have the label for saying the username, the input where the player can type in their username, and the button so they can log in. So under form, let's go add a component, vertical layout group. And you can see it already sort of helped us out here. What I want to do is I want to control the child's size, and I want to do the width, so it'll stretch the child all the way out. I'm not going to do child forced expand, so now it'll stack it like this. And I'm going to control that using some other components. So let's go to the text and we'll say user name. And for the height, I'm going to make this slightly bigger. And I'm going to put it on the bottom. For the text input field, I'm going to do the same height, which I think I used. I'm going to make it slightly smaller at 100. It's already arranged, so it is on the left side. But we're going to go to the text and we're going to do auto fit. And we're going to make it where it centers itself. And for the placeholder as well, we're going to do the same. So you can see that's much larger now. If you want this to be a different size using AutoFit, or if you want a hard-coded one, feel free to use that as well. And you can change the color if you want. We'll work on colors at a later point. And lastly, let's go to the button, and let's change its height to maybe 100. So right now, we have no spacing on each side, so let's fix that. So if you go back to the form and you go to the layout, you can go under the vertical layout group. There's a left padding and a right padding. So let's try 15. That looks good. 15. That looks good too. And then top and bottom, we'll add padding between your elements. So I think we need a little bit. So I'm going to do 15 and 15. Now that adds it around this side. So I think for spacing is what we're going to do. There we go. But right now, this text still says button, so let's go to it and do login. Let's change the auto size for that one as well. And for the colors, let's just do a nice blue. And for the button color, or sprite image, let's choose another one. And I have a button 7, I think. Nope, button 0. There we go. That looks good. And let's change this color as well. Let's change this back to maybe a white. There we go. That looks all right. For our text field, let's change this to be a darker color, because right now I think it's just set at a light gray. So let's match this like brown dark color that's in his eye. And let's do the same here. And then I'm just going to scale it down a little bit on the alpha so it looks a little lighter, because that's just the placeholder text. And let's change that to say inner user name dot dot dot. And right now you can see it's sort of cutting off the E. So to change that, we can change to the rect tool, and we can drag in this little yellow box slightly on each side, just so these characters don't get cut off. And now let's fix this username, and let's do a similar thing where we drag in this yellow box. And let's change the color to also match this dark color. Let's do auto size, and I kind of want this to be slightly smaller. There we go. So this will set up the layout of our login page. So let's actually get to coding now. To do that, let's go to our project folder, code. Now let's right click and create new folder, Playfab. Inside of Playfab, let's do create C# script, Playfab login. In our scene, let's right click, create empty, and we'll do Playfab login. And let's attach that script. Now let's open up our Playfab login. Now let's update this boiler code that we got when creating the class. So let's remove these two using statements. Let's get rid of this update function. Let's get rid of this comment. And let's add a couple regions. So the first one's going to be region unity methods. And region, new region. This will be private methods. We'll have another one that'll be for our public methods. And lastly, we'll have one for the Playfab callbacks. All right. And we'll populate this as we go. Now let's add a couple using statements here. So we can call the methods in our SDK. So the first one will be using Playfab, and the second one will be using Playfab.client models. So let's go to our start method, and let's do a if string.is null or empty, and we're going to check the Playfab settings.title ID. So this will check the title ID that we set up in the wizard. If for some reason you didn't use the wizard, or if you accidentally cleared it, this will just be a double check that we can automatically set our title ID to be the correct ID through code. So we're going to do Playfab settings.title ID equals, and this will be the title ID that 5-character string that you see in your dashboard inside of Playfab. Now let's define a variable that we can update through our UI. So let's go up here and do a serialized field. That's a private string variable called username. And we're going to expose it using a public method. We're going to do public void set username. And we're going to do string name. That autocorrect sometimes is very interesting. So we're going to do username equals name. And to save this throughout our project, we're going to set a player prefs. We're going to do set string. The string key will be username in all caps, and we will be passing it in username. Now let's switch back into Unity and let's go to our input field. And let's scroll down to where the on value changed event is, and let's drag in our Playfab login. Drop down and let's go Playfab login and let's go set username, and you want to do the top one under this dynamic string because that will pass in the text that's entered. You don't want to use the one that's down here. So let's do set username, and now whenever we type into this text box, it will be updating our username successfully. So the next thing we need to do is switch over back to the code and implement a button click for this login. So now that we're back in the code, let's go to public methods and do a public void log in. And what we're going to do here is we're going to check to see if our username is valid. So let's do if is valid username. And if it is not a valid username, then we're just going to return. There we go. However, if it is a valid username, we are going to log in using custom ID. So this is one of the methods you can log into Playfab. There's a lot of different login types. You can do it with email, you can do it with a custom ID, you can do it with an Android ID or iOS or device, along with I think Steam and some other ones. So let's go under our private methods now and do private bool is valid username. And for a username to be valid for Playfab, it needs to be between 3 and 24 characters. So let's do if username.length is greater than or equal to 3 and username.length is less than or equal to 24. We will make this return true. So we'll just declare a variable real quick and we'll default that to false. However, if this is a true if statement, we will set that to true and we will return our is valid variable. And that resolved our issue here. Now let's declare our next method, and that will be a private void log in. We're going to call it with custom ID. Let's go down here and let's change that name. I just like it better. So what we need to do is actually use the Playfab SDK now. And this call is very simple. So all we have to do is first we're going to do a debug.log, and we are going to just say log in to Playfab as, and we'll just do username. And we will now create our login request. So it's a var request new login with custom ID request. And all we need to do is pass in two things here. We need to do a custom ID, and we're going to set that to username, and create account, we're going to set that to true. So what that will do is it will log in using our custom ID, which is username, and if that custom ID does not exist, then it will create an account. If it does exist, it'll just log in. So what we need to do is actually invoke this. So we're going to do Playfab client API dot login with custom ID, and we're going to pass it in the request. The next thing is a callback, and this is when it actually is succeeding with the request. So we'll do on login custom ID success. And then the third one is a callback if there's an error. And we're just going to call this on failure. So these are also methods that we need to generate. So let's generate that method as well as the on failure. Just going to reorder these because I like my to succeed before I fail. And I'm going to rename this to result. Get rid of our boilerplate here. Rename this to error. What I'm going to do now is debug.log. And I'm just going to say you have logged into Playfab using custom ID, and we'll just do username dot, no, we'll just do username. Then we'll go down here and we'll say dot log there was an issue with your request, and we will print out error dot generate error report, and that's a method. So this will give us some additional details on what happened. So let's save that and let's switch into Unity. Let's go to our TextMouse Pro button. Let's scroll down over here and go on click. Let's drag in our Playfab login game object. Let's go select the login method. Once we do that, let's go back to the input field. And let's scroll through here. The content type, we're going to change that from standard to alphanumeric, and that'll make it where it only takes in numbers and letters. So let's save that. And now let's actually go to the game menu and press play. All right, so we are now live. Let's type in Brilith and hit login. So let's look at the console. So you log into Playfab as Brilith, and then you can see you have logged into Playfab using custom ID Brilith. And this part, if we look at our code, is after we receive the callback from Playfab saying that we were successfully logging in. Now let's go back to playfab.com and let's go look at our titles dashboard. So here, I'm going to click on Curse of the Beast. Under Players, let's click on that. And let's hit search. Before, there was no players if we would have searched, but now you can see there's one total player. So let's go search, and you'll see here's that custom player's ID. If we click on it, we scroll down, you can see the custom ID for this player is Brilith. So that's all you have to do to be able to set up an account in Playfab with a custom ID. So the next thing we want to do is update this display name to also be our custom ID name, because this display name is what we're going to show when we're interacting with players on the Photon network. So to do that, let's switch back over to the code and add another method. So now that we're back in the code, what we want to do real quick is actually move these two methods down to our Playfab callback section. Save that. And under private methods, let's do another one. And we're going to call this private void update display name. And what we're going to do is we're going to just simply update the display name with the username that we have. And we're going to make this method take in a display name variable, which will just simply be our username. And we're going to do debug.log updating Playfab accounts display name to, I'll do display name. So again, we're going to do var request equals new update user title display name request. And here we're going to do display name equals the display name that we passed in. And then we're going to do Playfab client API dot update user title display name. We're going to pass it in request. And then this is the callback that happens when it succeeds. And we're going to do on display name success. And then for when it errors, we're going to do on failure. So we were able to use the same on failure method here, but we will have to generate a new private method for this on display name success. So let's generate that and let's copy and paste it down here to our Playfab callbacks. So we're going to do debug.log. We're going to change this obj to result. And we're going to say you have updated the display name of the Playfab account. So when are we actually going to call update display name? So when we're going to do it is actually in the callback of this on login custom ID success. So let's go under this debug log. We're going to do update display name, and this takes in a string. So we're going to pass it in username. And now let's switch back over to Unity and run this. Alright, so in Unity, let's just hit the play button. Let's type in our username and click login. So just like before, log into Playfab as Brilith. You have logged in as Brilith. And then now it says updating Playfab display name to Brilith. And then we have this callback of you have updated the display name of the Playfab account. So let's go back into the playfab.com dashboard for our title, and let's make sure that it actually got updated on their end. Alright, so back at the titles dashboard, let's go to players and hit search. And now you can already see that we have Brilith underneath this ID, but let's just verify it. Let's click on the ID for the player, and now you can see display name is updated to Brilith. So this will now conclude our setup portion for Playfab in getting the account logged in and created. We're going to do one last simple thing, and that will be making it where we go from our login screen to our main menu. So let's do that real quick. So now back in Unity, let's right click, create empty. We're just going to call this scene controller. Let's go to project. Let's navigate to our code. We're going to go create folder scene. And we're going to create a C# script called scene controller. And we're going to attach that script to our scene controller game object. And let's open it up. So we're going to get rid of everything here. We're going to get rid of some of these using statements as well that we don't need. And all we're going to do is do a public static void load scene. And we're going to make it take in a string. We do, however, need to use one using statement, and it's unity engine.scene management. And we're going to do scene manager.load scene, and we're pass it in name. And what we're going to do is call this load scene now inside of our Playfab login. And where we're going to do that is once we've updated our on display name. So let's go scene controller dot load scene, and we're going to pass in main menu. Now that we're back in Unity, let's go to File, Build Settings, and right now we don't have any scenes here. So let's go to our scene folder and drag in each one of these. And we need these here because we're going to be loading between the login screen and the main menu. Now let's save our game. and let's play. So now let's type in Brilith and log in. And voila, we are now logged in as Brilith, as we saw these debug lines. And then we loaded into the main menu, which automatically was connecting to Photon with this random tester that we set up last time. So what we're going to do is modify this testers here to not use some random GUID, but to actually use our player prep that we saved for username. Let's do that now. So what we're going to do is our random name is going to no longer be used. And we're going to delete that. And we're going to go string nickname equals playerpreps dot get string. And we're going to do username, all caps, or however you spelt it. Oh, that's all we have to do. And let's change random name to nickname. Let's save that and switch back over to Unity. Let's hit play. Let's type in our name Brilith, log in. You can see connecting to Playfab as Brilith, and right here you can see connect to Photon as Brilith. And now we've actually connected to Playfab and Photon using the same username / nickname. So that will conclude our getting started with Playfab. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Also, please join our Discord if you have any questions or are looking for any additional videos in the future. There will be an invite link in the description below, along with some additional resources you can use to getting started with Playfab. I'll be putting out the next video shortly, and it will be on how to implement a friend system using both Playfab and Photon. Future videos in this series will include how to build a party invite system, a recent player list, a simple shop, how to store stats inside of Playfab, leaderboards, and much more. As always, thank you for watching. Have a good one.